I never believed in the law of attraction. Not because I doubted it, because I hated it. People lost their children, their homes, their entire lives in a single night. Yet everywhere I looked, someone was saying, just think at the right frequency. The universe gives you what you think about. Align yourself with the right vibration, and your life will change. The idea that the universe was some invisible machine handing out rewards to anyone with the right thoughts felt insulting. To me, it wasn't hope. It was cruelty. At first, I ignored it. Instagram, YouTube, podcasts. The same message was everywhere. I laughed at it, not politely. I mocked it. Then it reached my group of friends. One evening after work, the conversation drifted there again. One friend said he'd manifested a promotion. Another claimed he'd placed an order with the universe for the house he'd always wanted. I laughed. If positive thoughts attract good things, I said, I'll do the exact opposite. I'll wish for terrible things. None of them will happen. That should prove how ridiculous this is. That was the sentence that ruined my life. On my way home, I bought a cheap black notebook. Nothing special, no symbols, no strange designs. Just a plain notebook sitting at the back of a stationery shelf, the kind nobody ever bought. On the first page, I wrote one sentence. Tomorrow morning, I'll spill my coffee on myself. Then I closed the notebook and forgot about it. The next morning, as I walked into the office, someone rushed through the entrance and bumped into me. My coffee spilled all over my shirt. The people nearby laughed. I simply shook my head. Perfect timing, a coincidence. Exactly what I expected. So I wrote another sentence. I'll lose my job this month. It made no sense. Our company had just announced the highest profits in its history. My manager had even hinted at a promotion. It was impossible. 3 weeks later, our CEO was arrested for accounting fraud. The company shut down overnight. Along with hundreds of others, I lost my job. Another coincidence, I told myself. What else could I call it? As the weeks passed, I decided to push the experiment further. I stopped writing small things. Each time I raised the stakes, not because I believed, because I was bored. I wanted the universe to fail. I needed something that would leave no room for coincidence. Within 30 days, my apartment will burn down. I lived in a new building. There was no fireplace. The wiring was brand new. Every floor had smoke detectors. There was no chance it would happen. On the 22nd night, I woke to thick smoke burning my throat. At first I thought I was dreaming. Then I smelled melting plastic. The fire had started in the electrical panel downstairs. That's what the fire department's report said. By the time the flames were out, half the building was uninhabitable. My apartment was completely destroyed. Everything I owned had turned to ash. Everything. Wrapped in a gray emergency blanket, I sat on the sidewalk when a firefighter walked over and handed me the notebook. I figured you'd want this. I stared at the notebook. Out of everything I owned, why had this been the only thing left untouched? I should have thrown it away. I didn't. That night, my younger sister, Emily, took me to her house. Stay here for a few weeks, she said. At least until you're back on your feet. Emily was 2 years younger than me. She was the kind of person who could find light in complete darkness. I was the pessimist. She was the one who kept me going. On the first night after I moved into her place, she found the notebook. She didn't read all of it. A few pages were enough. The expression on her face changed immediately. Daniel, leave it. I smiled. You're afraid of a notebook? No. Her face turned serious. "I'm afraid you think thoughts are just a game. I'm only recording coincidences." She didn't answer. She handed the notebook back to me. "Then don't write in it again." That night, I couldn't sleep. Her last words echoed in my mind. "Then don't write in it again." The next morning, I opened to a blank page. I stared at it for a long time. Maybe Emily was right. Maybe I should stop. But if I walked away now, one question would stay with me forever. I took a deep breath and wrote, "Someone I love will die in a car accident this year." By then, it had become personal. For the first time, my hand trembled. Even I felt the weight of those words. I thought about tearing the page out. I shook my head. What was I doing? Was I really afraid of a sentence? Days passed, then weeks. Throughout October, I forced myself to act normal. I went to job interviews. Emily and I had dinner together, but I could never stop thinking about the notebook. If I overheard people talking about a car accident in a cafe, my stomach tightened. Whenever I heard an ambulance siren, I held my breath. November passed, then December. Every time my phone rang, I flinched. Whenever Emily came home late, I found myself standing by the window. One evening, she got off work 30 minutes later than usual. I spent that entire half hour waiting by the front door, holding a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. When she finally came in, I didn't say a word. I just hugged her. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I'm fine." It was a lie. I never told her the truth. Because if I did, I'd have to tell her what I'd written, and I didn't have the courage. December 31st finally arrived. That night, we sat in the living room together. Emily turned on the television for the New Year's countdown. There were snacks on the table. I couldn't stop looking at the clock. 11:58 p.m. 11:59 p.m. The final 10 seconds. Emily smiled and started counting. 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year. Fireworks exploded outside. Emily hugged me. I kept staring at the clock. 12 o'clock. Then 12:01. No phone call. No terrible news. Nothing. The weight I'd carried for months vanished in an instant. I laughed at myself. For months, I'd been terrified. Of my own shadow, of a notebook, of a few words. I carried the notebook to my room. At the bottom of the final page, I wrote one last sentence. The game is over. Then I shoved it into the back of my closet. I swore I'd never open it again, because I'd finally won. At least, that's what I thought. "14 days later, my phone rang at 6 in the morning. Unknown number. The police officer introduced himself before telling me that Emily had been stopped at a red light on her way to work, when a truck driver who had fallen asleep behind the wheel crashed into the back of her car at 90 kilometers per hour. I don't remember driving to the hospital. I spent hours waiting in the hallway. Every time a door opened, I jumped to my feet. Every time, it was someone else. Finally, the doctor walked toward me. The moment I saw his face, I knew. He didn't have to say a word. Emily died that day. At the funeral, everyone talked about what a wonderful person she had been. I could think of only one thing. The year had ended. The sentence hadn't come true. So why? Why was it only 2 weeks late? After the funeral, the house felt unbearably quiet. The coffee mug she'd bought was still in the kitchen. Her blanket still rested on the couch. Her shoes were still by the front door. Everything was exactly where she'd left it. Everything. Except her. For months, I repeated the same sentence to myself. It was a coincidence, hundreds of times. Car accidents happen every day. Exhausted drivers fall asleep at the wheel every day. Statistics explain things like that. The only thing they couldn't explain was that I'd written it months before. For weeks I barely slept. I barely ate. I went from one interview to another, and none of them ever called back. But none of that was what was destroying me. What destroyed me was waking up every morning with the same question. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I took the notebook from the closet and drove to the old bridge outside town. For a long time, I just stared at its black cover. Then I threw it into the river. The current carried it away. I stood on the bridge until it disappeared into the darkness. For the first time, I truly believed it was over. The next morning, I opened my dresser drawer. The black notebook was sitting there. I froze. I couldn't even reach for it. I remembered everything from the night before. The wind on the bridge, the sound it made when it hit the water, the way the current slowly pulled it into the darkness. Every detail was still perfectly clear in my mind. Yet the notebook was here dry, untouched, as if it had never left. I stood there without moving for what felt like forever. Then, slowly, I closed the drawer. That was the first time in my life I stopped caring whether the law of attraction was real, or whether it had ever been real at all, because the answer no longer mattered. My life was already ruined. From that day on, I couldn't bring myself to think badly of anyone. Even if someone cut me off in traffic, I never muttered a single angry word. I stopped watching the news. I stopped letting myself get angry, because the notebook was no longer what frightened me most. What terrified me was never being certain again that a thought was just a thought. Maybe I'm right. Maybe all of this really was nothing more than coincidence. Even Emily. Even if I'd never written that sentence, she still would have driven through that intersection that morning. I'll never know, and I don't want to know anymore. Because while I was trying to prove something wrong, I ended up building my entire life around it. Sometimes I stand in front of that drawer for minutes at a time. I never open it. I don't have to. I already know exactly what the last page says. The game is over.